Hi, this is Dr. Dix Winston, Crosspoint Community Church. Thank you for joining us for the 6th of 21 devotions in the Gospel of John. We feel it's so important during this uncertain, chaotic, unknowable time. We've never been in a place like this, that we focus on Jesus Christ, and that's what we're trying to do in these 21 devotions. Mine today is from John the 6th chapter. I hope you've read John the 6th chapter. If you haven't, pause the video and read the 6th chapter, especially the first 14 verses where I'm going to spend most of my time. I don't have time to teach you verse by verse. I'm going to be doing that on Sunday as we're back in the epistle of the Philippians. But I want you to remember that this is a miracle that occurs in all 4 of the Gospels. That means that God thought what was going on in feeding 5,000 men, with wives 10,000, with kids maybe 12,000 people, is one of the most important signs that Jesus did in the Bible. You'll recall that in John the 20th chapter, verses 30 and 31, the reason he wrote John was, he says, many other things that Jesus did. These things he has written in order that you may believe, and by believing have life in his name. So these signs point us to who Jesus Christ is. Now I want you to notice in the 4th verse of chapter 6, it says this: "Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was near." Now why is that important? Most of us today, because we're not Jewish and we didn't live in the Old Testament, the Passover is kind of, we know something about it, what it's about, but we're not sure exactly why. But here, God singles out the Passover during this miracle. Why? Well, whenever you were a Jew, if you thought of the Passover, you thought of Moses, you thought of miracles, you thought of manna or bread from heaven. So it's very important that he mentions that here because of what he's going to say about his ministry and what he does. So I want you to notice that Jesus then asked the disciples, how are we going to feed all these people that we have sitting around here? And neither Andrew or Philip have any idea. Philip says, we don't have the money. We only have maybe 200 days of wages. We can't begin to touch the need here. And then Andrew probably ripped off some little kid's lunch and says, well, all we've got is 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And so then they start looking around, and all of a sudden Jesus is kind of going, what am I, chopped liver? And then Jesus rings the dinner bell. He tells the people to sit down. Now, in the Old Testament times, and we're still in that period, whenever you reclined or sat down, that's when you ate. He's ringing the dinner bell. And he feeds them, and notice he feeds them so much. Look at verse 11. Also, the fish, they ate as much as they wanted. They filled up 12 baskets were left over of all these fish. You see, when Jesus provides, he oversupplies. I want you to notice the punchline, and don't miss this, because this is what those first 13 verses are pointing to. It says in verse 14, look at that. Therefore, when the people saw the sign which he had performed, they said, this truly is the prophet who is to come into the world. Now, in order to understand that, you don't understand the Passover, you won't understand the reference to the prophet. You need to turn to Deuteronomy, the 18th chapter. And in Deuteronomy, the 18th chapter, verse 15 says this: the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you. From your own countrymen you shall listen to him. And then he imposes strong consequences for not listening to Jesus. It shall come about that whoever will not listen to my words, this prophet that's to come, which he shall speak in my name, I will require it of him. In Deuteronomy, the 34th chapter, toward the close of the end of the canon, it says this: since that time, no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. Do you see what he's saying here? Jesus is the prophet that was prophesied in Deuteronomy 18. He is the prophet that is coming into the world. But you see, this prophet not only tells us what the truth is from God, Not only did he feed these 5,000, 10, 12,000 people, but I don't want you to miss the rest of the chapter, because it's not just bread for this day that he offers. It's bread for eternity. Jesus says, I am the bread of life. If you believe in his promise, you will experience eternal life. If you've never believed Jesus for eternal life, I encourage you to do so now. And if you've done that, please share these devotions with other people so that they might believe the message of life. A dear friend of mine said, this may be the greatest time since the Reformation to share the message of Jesus Christ. Join us tomorrow as we're in chapter 7.